The ranch sat at the edge of nowhere, where the prairie bled into stone and the wind carried no mercy. Jacob Mercer had built it that way on purpose, far enough from town that questions didn't follow, close enough to water that the cattle didn't die. He was a man who measured his words like bullets and his silence like land. 52 years old, grey at the temples, hands like worn leather. He'd seen enough of the world to know when to turn away from it. But that morning, he didn't turn away. The sun hadn't cleared the ridge when he heard the sound, faint, irregular, like something broken trying to move. He stood on his porch with a tin cup of coffee gone cold in his hand, listening. The cattle were quiet. The horses hadn't stirred. That left only one direction, the old line shack, half a mile south, where he stored hay and tools he didn't use anymore. Jacob set down the cup and walked. The grass crunched under his boots. Frost still clung to the shadows where the light hadn't reached. He moved with the deliberate pace of a man who didn't hurry for anything, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the low hills and the cottonwoods that marked the creek. He wasn't expecting trouble. Trouble usually announced itself louder than this. When he reached the shack, the door was ajar. He stopped 10 feet back, hand resting on the grip of the revolver at his hip. The wood frame sagged to one side, weathered gray by years of neglect. A sparrow shot out through a gap in the roof. Inside, something shuffled, slow, deliberate, human. "Come out," Jacob said. His voice was flat, no threat in it, just fact. "Silence." He took a step closer. "I know you're in there. You can walk out or I can come in, your choice." Another beat of silence, then a voice, thin and cracked, barely more than a whisper. "Please." Jacob's hand didn't leave his gun, but his jaw tightened. He nudged the door open with his boot and let the morning light spill inside. She was curled in the corner, half buried under a rotted canvas tarp, her dress torn and filthy, face streaked with dirt and something darker. Blood, maybe. Her hair hung in matted tangles, and her eyes, wide, wild, pale as winter's sky, locked onto him like a trapped animal deciding whether to run or bite. She couldn't have been more than 20. Jacob didn't move. He'd learned long ago that stillness was a language of its own. "You hurt?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her hands, thin and trembling, clutched something against her chest, a bundle wrapped in cloth. It took him a moment to realize it was moving. "A baby." Jacob exhaled slow through his nose. He glanced back toward the ranch, then at the ridge beyond. No smoke, no riders, not yet. "How long you been here?" he asked. 2 days, she whispered. Her voice cracked on the second word. "Maybe 3. You alone?" She nodded, eyes darting to the door behind him, like she expected someone to come through it any second. Jacob crouched down, keeping his distance, keeping his hands visible. "I'm not gonna hurt you, but if someone's coming after you, I need to know." Her breath hitched. She pulled the baby closer. They already did. He studied her face, the bruise along her jaw, the split lip, the hollowed-out look of someone who'd run until there was nothing left to run on. He'd seen that look before, on soldiers, on women fleeing bad marriages, on men who'd crossed the wrong people and lived just long enough to regret it. "They still looking?" he asked. "Yes." Jacob stood, rolling his shoulders, thinking he could walk away, close the door, pretend he'd never opened it. That's what smart men did, what careful men did, men who wanted to keep breathing. But he didn't move toward the door. "Can you walk?" he asked. She blinked, like the question didn't make sense. "Why?" "Because if you're staying in my shack, you're gonna freeze or starve, and I'm not in the habit of burying strangers on my land. So, can you walk?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Then get up." She didn't. She just stared at him, clutching the baby, eyes searching his face for something, maybe a lie, maybe hope. Jacob waited. He was good at waiting. Finally, she pushed herself up, slow and shaking, using the wall for balance. The baby made a soft sound, and she shushed it instinctively, rocking slightly. Jacob saw the way her knees buckled, the way she caught herself before falling. "Give me the baby," he said. Her arms tightened. "No. I'm not asking to keep it. I'm asking so you don't drop it." She stared at him for a long moment, then with trembling hands passed the bundle over. Jacob took it carefully, cradling the child against his chest. It was lighter than he expected, wrapped in a torn blanket that smelled of smoke and sweat. The baby's face was pale, eyes closed, breathing shallow but steady. He looked at the girl. "What's your name?" "Anna." "All right, Anna, walk." She took one step, then another. Her legs barely held her, but she kept moving. Jacob walked beside her, slow, matching her pace. They crossed the field in silence, the wind picking up as the sun climbed higher. He kept his eyes on the ridgeline, scanning for dust or movement. There was nothing yet. But there would be. When they reached the house, Jacob pushed the door open with his boot and gestured her inside. Anna stumbled over the threshold and collapsed into the nearest chair, head falling forward, breath coming in shallow gasps. Jacob laid the baby on the table, unwrapping it just enough to check for wounds or fever. The child stirred, whimpering softly. No blood, no breaks, just hungry and cold. He covered it again and looked at Anna. "When did you last eat?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were half closed, body sagging with exhaustion. Jacob walked to the stove, lit the fire, and set a pot of water to boil. He pulled down a tin of beans, a loaf of hard bread, and a jar of preserves. He worked in silence, the way he always did, hands moving with the efficiency of a man who'd lived alone too long to waste motion. When the food was ready, he set it in front of her. "Eat." She looked at it like it might disappear. Then she picked up the spoon and ate, slow at first, then faster, like her body remembered what hunger was and couldn't stop. Jacob poured her water. She drank it in one long pull. He sat across from her, arms folded, watching. "You gonna tell me what happened?" he asked. Anna set down the spoon. Her hands were still shaking. "You don't want to know." "Maybe not," Jacob said, "but if someone's coming, I need to." She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, eyes distant. "They'll say I stole something." "Did you?" She looked at the baby. "Yes." Jacob leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. He didn't ask what, didn't need to. The answer was right there on the table, breathing soft and small. "Who's coming?" he asked. Anna's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Everyone." Jacob didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, watching the dark stretch of land beyond his fence. The moon was a thin sliver, barely enough to see by, but he didn't need much. He knew every rock, every dip, every place a man could hide if he wanted to get close. Anna slept in his bed. He'd given it to her without discussion, laid the baby beside her wrapped in blankets he hadn't used in years. She'd protested weakly, but exhaustion had won. Within minutes, she was out, her breathing deep and uneven, like her body was still deciding whether it was safe to rest. Jacob had pulled a chair up near the door and settled in. He'd done this before, kept watch, waited for something that might or might not come. It was a kind of patience that most men didn't have, the kind you learned when you realized that rushing only got you killed faster. Around midnight, he heard hoofbeats. Distant, 2 horses, maybe 3, moving slow along the ridge. Jacob stood, easing the window open just enough to listen. They weren't riding hard, weren't pushing. That meant they were tracking, not chasing, looking, not knowing. "Not yet." The sound faded east toward the creek. Jacob waited another 20 minutes, then closed the window and sat back down. His hand rested on the rifle. He didn't pray, hadn't in a long time, but he thought, in his own way, about what came next. By dawn, Anna was awake. She moved quietly, like she didn't want to disturb anything, didn't want to take up space. Jacob had coffee brewing and bread warming on the stove. She stood in the doorway, holding the baby, eyes red-rimmed and cautious. "They came last night," Jacob said, not looking at her. "Didn't find anything, but they'll be back." Anna's face went pale. "How do you know?" "Because that's what men do when they want something." He poured 2 cups of coffee and set one on the table. "Sit." She did slowly, like her legs didn't quite trust the chair. The baby stirred in her arms, and she rocked it gently, humming something too soft to hear. Jacob sat across from her. "You need to tell me the truth now, all of it." Anna stared into her coffee. Her voice, when it came, was flat and hollow. His name was Clayton Hayes. He owned the saloon in town, and the hotel, and half the land from here to the rail line. She paused, swallowing hard. He owned me too. Jacob said nothing. He just listened. I worked for him, cleaning, cooking, whatever he needed. He didn't ask. He just took. Her hands tightened around the cup. When I got pregnant, he didn't care. Said the baby would work for him too when it was old enough. Said I'd stay until I died or he got bored. Jacob's jaw clenched, but his face stayed still. I tried to leave once, Anna continued. He found me before I made it past the church, dragged me back, locked me in a room for 3 days. She looked up, eyes hard now, no tears. So when the baby came, I waited until he was drunk, waited until the house was quiet, and I ran. How far's the town? Jacob asked. Day. Woe day's ride, maybe less if they know where to look. Jacob leaned back, thinking. 2 days meant they had time, not much but enough to decide. They'll come here, he said. Hayes will send men, maybe the law if he bought them, and they'll ask questions. I know. And if I lie, if I hide you, I'm part of it. Anna nodded slowly. I'm not asking you to. Jacob looked at her, really looked, at the bruise on her jaw. The way she held the baby like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. The way her hands didn't shake anymore, even though her voice still did. What's the baby's name? He asked. Anna blinked, caught off guard. I haven't named her yet. Hers? Yes. Jacob nodded. He stood, walked to the stove, and poured himself more coffee. He stared out the window at the empty land, the wide sky, the place he'd built precisely so no one could tell him what to do. I don't care what they did, he said quietly. Anna looked up. What? Jacob turned to face her. I don't care what Hayes owns. I don't care what the law says. I don't care if God himself rides up that hill. His voice was steady, certain. You're staying. Anna's breath caught. You don't have to. I know I don't. Jacob set his cup down, but I am. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The baby made a small sound, and Anna rocked her, eyes glistening but not spilling over. Why? She whispered. Jacob didn't answer right away. He looked at the rifle leaning against the wall, at the years of solitude he'd wrapped around himself like armor, at the choice in front of him that wasn't really a choice at all. Because if I don't, he said finally, I'm no different than the men who put you here. Anna's lips trembled. She looked down at the baby, at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket, and something in her broke open, not with despair, but with something close to hope. Thank you, she whispered. Jacob shook his head. Don't thank me yet. The sound of hoofbeats returned that afternoon, closer this time, deliberate. 3 riders crested the ridge and stopped, silhouetted against the sky. Jacob watched them from the porch, rifle in hand but not raised. They didn't come down. They just sat there, watching. After a few minutes, they turned and rode back the way they came. Jacob exhaled slowly. Inside, Anna stood by the window, holding the baby tight. They know I'm here, she said. They suspect, Jacob corrected. That's different. They'll come back. Yeah, Jacob checked the rounds in his rifle. They will. Anna looked at him, fear and gratitude warring in her eyes. You could still tell me to leave. Jacob met her gaze. I could. But you won't. No, he said, I won't. She nodded, as if accepting something she couldn't fully understand. Then she turned back to the window, watching the empty ridge, waiting for the storm she knew was coming. Jacob sat down in his chair, rifle across his lap, and did the same. They came 3 days later, just after noon when the sun was high and shadows short. 6 riders, moving in a line, slow and deliberate, like a noose tightening. Jacob saw them from a mile out, dust rising in their wake, and he knew. He walked inside, calm, measured. Anna was feeding the baby, humming that same soft tune. She looked up when she heard his boots. They're here, Jacob said. Her face went white, but she didn't move, didn't panic. She just held the baby closer and nodded. Stay inside, Jacob said. No matter what you hear, stay inside. Jacob. Anna, his voice was firm but not harsh. Trust me. She swallowed hard, then nodded again. Jacob stepped back onto the porch and waited. He didn't sit, didn't pace, just stood there with his rifle resting against the post beside him, hands loose at his sides. The riders came on slow, fanning out as they approached, forming a half-circle around the front of the house. The man in the center was older, late 50s, with a thick grey beard and a badge pinned to his vest. Sheriff Dawes. Jacob knew him, not well but enough. Jacob, Dawes said, reining his horse to a stop 20 feet out. Sheriff. Dawes looked at the house, then back at Jacob. You know why we're here. I can guess. One of the other men, younger, with a sharp jaw and cold eyes, leaned forward in his saddle. Don't play dumb, Mercer. You got her in there or not? Jacob's gaze slid to the young man, then back to Dawes. Who's asking? Clayton Hayes is asking, the young man snapped, and you're gonna answer. Dawes held up a hand. Easy, Colt. He looked at Jacob, his expression weary. Hayes says a woman stole something from him, says she ran this direction, says she's dangerous. That right, Jacob said evenly. That's what he says. Jacob tilted his head slightly. And what do you say, Sheriff? Dawes shifted in his saddle. I say I got a job to do, and that job is bringing her back. Back to what? That's not your concern. Jacob's jaw tightened. It is if she's on my land. Cole. T spurred his horse forward a step. Listen, old man. Colt, Dawes' voice cracked like a whip. The young man stopped, glaring but stayed quiet. Dawes sighed, rubbing his face. Jacob, don't make this harder than it needs to be. If she's here, bring her out. We'll take her back, sort it out in town. No one needs to get hurt. Sort what out? Jacob asked. What'd she steal? Dawes hesitated. That's between her and Hayes. Then I guess it's none of my business. Jacob. I said, Jacob repeated, his voice low and iron hard. It's none of my business. So unless you got a warrant, Sheriff, you can turn around and ride back. The silence stretched long and thin. The horses shifted, hooves scraping dirt. One of the men spat into the dust. Colt's hand drifted toward his gun. Dawes watched Jacob for a long moment, then shook his head. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first. Hayes won't let this go. I don't expect him to. Dawes leaned forward, lowering his voice. You know what kind of man he is. You know what he'll do. Jacob met his eyes. Yeah, I do. Another beat of silence, then Dawes straightened, exhaling slow. All right, he turned his horse. Let's go. Colt didn't move. We're just leaving. We don't have a warrant, Dawes said, and I'm not starting a war over a woman I've never met. Hayes is gonna. Hayes can come himself if he wants her that bad. Dawes spurred his horse and rode off. The other men followed, reluctant, casting dark looks back at Jacob. Colt was the last to leave, his hand still hovering near his gun, eyes promising violence. See you soon, Mercer, he said, voice dripping venom. Jacob didn't answer. He just watched them go, waited until they were dust on the horizon, then walked back inside. Anna was standing in the kitchen, the baby in her arms, tears streaming down her face. They'll come back, she whispered. I know. They'll bring more men, maybe the whole town. Maybe. Jacob, you can't. Anna, he turned to her, his face lined and hard but his eyes steady. I meant what I said. I don't care what they did. I don't care what they say. You're not going back. She shook her head, sobbing now, but they'll kill you. Jacob walked to the window, looked out at his land, the fields, the cattle, the long stretch of nothing that he'd carved out and called his own. He thought about the life he'd lived, quiet and alone, safe and small. And he thought about the girl standing behind him, holding a baby that wasn't his, fighting a fight that wasn't his. Except it was now. Then they'll have to, he said quietly. Anna covered her mouth, muffling a sob. Jacob turned back to her, his expression softening just slightly. "Get some rest," he said, "while you can." She didn't argue, she just nodded, clutching the baby, and walked back to the bedroom. Jacob heard the door close softly. He sat down at the table, pulled his revolver from his belt, and began checking the cylinder. 6 rounds. He had more in the drawer, a rifle, a shotgun, enough to hold them off for a while. But not forever. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Jacob loaded his guns in silence, one bullet at a time, and waited for the storm. The days that followed were strange and quiet, like the eye of something terrible. Jacob went about his work, feeding the cattle, mending fence, chopping wood, while Anna stayed close to the house, watching the ridge, rocking the baby. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. There was an understanding between them now, unspoken but solid. On the 4th evening, Anna made dinner. Jacob came in from the barn to find the table set, a pot of stew steaming, bread sliced and buttered. He stopped in the doorway, caught off guard. "You didn't have to do that," he said. Anna looked up from where she was laying the baby down in a makeshift crib, a drawer lined with blankets. "I know," she said softly, "but I wanted to." Jacob washed his hands and sat down. The stew was good, simple, but warm and filling. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the soft breathing of the baby. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" Jacob asked. Anna shrugged. "My mother, before she died." "How old were you?" 12. Jacob nodded, chewing slowly. "That's young." "It was enough time," Anna said quietly. "She taught me what mattered." They fell silent again. Jacob mopped up the last of his stew with a piece of bread, then leaned back in his chair. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked. Anna looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "After this, after Hayes, assuming we make it through." She stared down at her bowl, turning the spoon slowly. "I don't let myself think that far." "Why not?" "Because hope is dangerous," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "It makes you careless." Jacob considered that. Maybe, or maybe it's the only thing that keeps you standing. Anna looked up, searching his face. "You really believe we'll make it through?" This." Jacob didn't answer right away. He looked at the baby, sleeping peacefully in her drawer, tiny fists curled against her chest. He looked at Anna, thin and tired, but still here, still fighting. "I believe," he said slowly, "that some things are worth the fight, whether you win or not." Anna's eyes glistened. She looked away quickly, blinking hard. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't." "Jacob." "I mean it." He stood, carrying his bowl to the wash basin. "You don't owe me anything. You're here because I said you could be, that's all." Anna stood too, wrapping her arms around herself. "Why did you, really?" Jacob turned to face her. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then quietly he said, "I had a daughter once." Anna's breath caught. "She'd be about your age now," Jacob continued, his voice distant. "Maybe older, I don't know. I haven't seen her since she was 8. "What happened?" Jacob's jaw worked. "Her mother took her, after things went bad between us, took her east to family I never met. I tried to follow, but she made it clear I wasn't wanted, so I stopped trying." He looked out the window at the darkening sky, "Built this place, figured if I couldn't be a father, I could at least be left alone." Anna stepped closer. "Do you regret it, not going after her?" "Every day," Jacob said simply. She reached out, hesitated, then gently touched his arm. "You're a good man, Jacob Mercer." He shook his head. "I'm just a man who made a choice, same as you." "It's more than that." Maybe, he looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face. "Or maybe we're all just trying to outrun the things we've done." Anna smiled, sad and small. "Then I'm glad we're running in the same direction." Jacob almost smiled back, almost. That night, after Anna had gone to bed, Jacob sat by the fire with a cup of whiskey he didn't drink. He thought about his daughter, her laugh, the way she used to climb onto his shoulders and pull his hair. He thought about the choices he'd made, the roads he'd walked away from. And he thought about the girl sleeping in his bed, the baby in the drawer, and the men who would come for them. He set the cup down, still full, and walked to the window. The stars were bright and cold, scattered across the sky like salt. Somewhere out there, Hayes was planning, gathering men, sharpening his anger into something sharp and final. Jacob rested his hand on the windowsill and spoke to the night. "Come on, then," he said quietly. "Let's finish this." They came at dawn, just like Jacob knew they would. He was already awake, rifle loaded, positioned behind the water trough with a clear view of the approach. Anna was inside with the baby, the door barred, windows shuttered. He told her not to come out no matter what. If things went bad, she was to take the baby and run out the back, through the creek, into the hills. There was a cave a mile north, food and blankets hidden there. He'd shown her the way the night before. She'd cried, he'd pretended not to notice. Now, as the sun broke over the ridge, Jacob counted them. 8 riders this time. Hayes at the front, older than Jacob expected, dressed in a fine coat with a rifle slung across his saddle. Sheriff Dawes rode beside him, face grim. Colt and the others flanked them, hands on their guns, eyes hungry. They stopped 30 yards out. Hayes dismounted slowly, like a man used to being watched, and took a few steps forward. "Jacob Mercer," he called, voice smooth and cold. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Jacob stood up from behind the trough, rifle resting across his arm. "I don't keep things that belong to other people." Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then you won't mind if we take a look inside?" "I would, actually." Hayes tilted his head. "That woman is a thief. She took property from me. I want it back." "She's not property," Jacob said evenly. "Neither is the baby. The law says different." Then the laws rung. Colt stepped forward, gun half drawn. "You got no right." "Colt," Hayes raised a hand, and the young man stopped, though his eyes burned. Hayes looked back at Jacob. "I'm trying to be reasonable here. You give her to me and we ride out. No one gets hurt." "And if I don't?" Hayes's smile faded. "Then we take her, and you." Jacob shifted his weight, rifle still lowered but ready. "You really want to die over this, Hayes?" "I could ask you the same thing." "I've made my peace with it," Jacob said. "Have you?" For a moment, Hayes didn't answer. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think you're a hero, Mercer? You think this matters?" "I think," Jacob said quietly, "that I'm done letting men like you decide what matters." Hayes's face went cold. He stepped back, nodding to his men. "Take him." They moved as one, 4 men spurring their horses forward, guns drawn. Jacob dropped behind the trough, rifle up, and fired. The first man went down, clutching his shoulder. The second veer. D off, horse screaming. Jacob levered another round, fired again. A third man fell. Then the world exploded. Gunfire cracked like thunder, bullets punching through the wood, splintering the trough, kicking up dirt. Jacob stayed low, moving, firing when he had a shot, reloading when he didn't. One of Hayes's men got close, dismounted, ran for the porch. Jacob shot him through the leg. The man went down screaming. Colt charged from the side, revolver blazing. Jacob felt a bullet tear through his sleeve, another graze his ribs. He spun, rifle coming up, and fired. Colt's hat flew off. The next shot took him in the chest. He fell hard and didn't move. Then silence. Jacob crouched behind the ruined trough, breathing hard, blood soaking his shirt. He counted. 3 men down, Colt dead. The others had pulled back, circling wide, trying to flank him. Hayes was still standing, untouched, watching. Sheriff Dawes sat his horse, looking sick. "Last chance, Mercer," Hayes shouted. Jacob didn't answer. He reloaded, hands shaking now, vision starting to blur. He'd been hit worse than he thought. The door behind him opened. "No," Jacob rasped. "Anna, get back." But it wasn't Anna. It was Sheriff Dawes, dismounted, walking slowly across the yard, hands raised, gun still holstered. "Enough," Dawes said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is done." Hayes turned on him. "What the hell are you doing?" Dawes stopped halfway between them, looking old and tired. "My job, which is upholding the law. not helping you murder a man for protecting a woman and a baby. She's a thief. She's a person, Dawes' voice cracked, and so is that baby, and I'm not standing by while you kill them over your pride. Hayes's face twisted with rage. You're finished, Dawes. Maybe, Dawes turned to Jacob, but so is this. Jacob met his eyes, then nodded slowly. He lowered his rifle. Hayes stared at them both, fury and disbelief warring on his face. Then he spat into the dirt, climbed back on his horse, and rode off without another word. The remaining men followed, casting uncertain glances back. Dawes walked over to Jacob, knelt down. You're bleeding. I'll live. Maybe, Dawes helped him to his feet, but you need a doctor. Anna appeared in the doorway, baby in her arms, face pale but determined. She ran to Jacob, eyes wide. I'm all right, Jacob said, though he wasn't sure that was true. Dawes looked at Anna, then at the baby. He took off his hat. Ma'am, I'm sorry for all of it. Anna just nodded, tears streaming. Dawes mounted his horse, looked down at Jacob one last time. You're a damn fool, Mercer. Yeah, Jacob said, I know. Dawes almost smiled. Then he rode off, leaving them alone in the quiet morning. 6 months later. The ranch looked different now. A new coat of paint on the barn, a garden growing beside the house, laundry hanging on a line, white and clean in the sun. Jacob stood on the porch, arms still stiff from the bullet wound, watching Anna hang diapers. The baby, named Clara, finally sat in a basket at her feet, babbling at the sky. Anna looked up and smiled. You're supposed to be resting. I am resting, Jacob said. She laughed, soft and easy, and went back to her work. Jacob leaned against the post, looking out at the land. Hayes had left the territory, last he'd heard, took his money and his pride and disappeared east. Dawes had kept his badge, though barely. The town talked, but talking was all they did. Anna and Clara stayed. Jacob never asked them to leave either. They just stayed. And slowly, the house stopped feeling so empty. Jacob didn't know if he deserved it, this second chance, this quiet life. But he'd stopped asking, stopped questioning. He just lived it, one day at a time, and that was enough. Clara made a sound, and Anna scooped her up, walking over to the porch. She handed the baby to Jacob, and he took her carefully, the weight of her familiar now. She likes you, Anna said. She tolerates me, Jacob corrected. Anna smiled, same thing. Jacob looked down at Clara, at her bright eyes and tiny hands, and for the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. Yeah, he said quietly, maybe it is. They stood there together, the three of them, as the sun climbed higher and the wind carried the smell of grass and dust and home. And Jacob Mercer, who had spent so long alone, realized he wasn't anymore. And he was glad.